Hello, my name's Liz Craig and welcome to my talk, Researching an Institution. I've been researching my family history for over 25 years and I've diversified into projects which illuminate the lives of my ancestors. I have 4 one-place studies, a study of a Victorian street, 2 studies of villages, Sudburn in Suffolk and Dunster in Somerset, and a study of the Temple Lodge Home for Inebriate Women in Torquay in Devon. I'm also interested in local history, local to my ancestors as well as to myself, and I'm passionate about researching historical context to bring the past to life. I've been a member of the Society for One Place Studies since it was founded in 2013 and currently serve on the committee, and I'm a member of the Few Forgotten Women team. So who are the Few Forgotten Women team? I'm a very small part of A Few Good Women, as we call our group. We're a group of women who met online over lockdown at talks or groups run by Janet Few. We realised that family or local historians can unintentionally overlook women's history, as it is often men who primarily leave more of a paper trail in historical records. Most of the Few Good Women are also one-placers and recognise the importance of place-based research in providing context for historical research. We meet online a couple of times a month. The Few Good Women group came up with the idea for Forgotten Women Fridays. My first experience in researching an institution was long before the creation of the Few Good Women group, and the approach I use for my study of the Temple Lodge Home for Inebriate Women is very different to that which we use on our Forgotten Women Fridays, so I'll tell you about both. We run Forgotten Women Fridays 3 times a year, where we choose a specific institution, or sometimes more than one, and crowdsource the research for the female residents. Examples of institutions we've researched before include the Farmfield Reformatory, St Joseph's Home for Inebriate Women, Leeds Industrial School and the Grange School of Housewifery. We do some preliminary scoping and research a bit about the history of the institution, including an archive visit to obtain supplementary information if there is any available. We publicise each Forgotten Women Friday on our blog and on social media, inviting anyone who's interested in helping research the residents of that institution to contact us. Volunteers are allocated one of the residents to research. On the day, we set up a Zoom room which is hosted by one or more of us, and volunteers are invited to drop in to ask advice or just to say hello. Volunteers research and then write up their person and send it to us for inclusion on the website. You can search our website by institution or by story category, for example, alcoholism, law breaking or mental health. Some of the terms used are historic medical terms which might not be as politically correct or respectful as terms we would use today. The Farmfield Reformatory for Inebriate Women in Hawley, Surrey, was set up by London County Council and opened in 1900. Initially there were beds for 30 women in the main house, but by the end of 1902, 6 new villas had been built to house another 80 patients. Staff lived on site in the home farm buildings, and matron presided over 25 staff. The grounds were beautiful, with flower and vegetable gardens and a lake. Each patient had her own bedroom. The villas had day rooms, dining rooms and a small kitchen. The better behaved patients were employed in the dairy farm. Patients learned to bake and make butter and were schooled in poultry farming, beekeeping, fruit farming, potato picking and weeding. The regime was intended to teach them how to keep house and encourage them towards a more simple life. It wasn't all idyllic though. The more difficult patients would spend time in the punishment cell, and some were transferred to the State Reformatory at Aylesbury Prison. Farmfield closed in November 1915. For the Inebriate Women Forgotten Women Friday, I researched Ada Drummond, one of the Farmfield patients. The images you can see on the screen here are from Ada's Farmfield case notes. Ada was born in 1867 in London. She was the 10th of 11 children born to Edward Hall, a cabinet maker, and his wife Caroline. In 1888, when she was aged 21, Ada married John Drummond, a clerk, but the marriage seems to have been short-lived. By the end of 1891, 24-year-old Ada had been before the court nearly 30 times. She was described as a well-educated but incorrigible person, so far as drink is concerned, and a missionary stated that her reclamation was morally impossible. She had been in rescue homes, in prison and in service. When in service, she became melancholy and had twice attempted suicide. Ada's life was a vicious circle of drunkenness, imprisonment and workhouse admissions. Inevitably, Ada was admitted to Farmfield on the 31st of October 1900. The casebook describes her as having dark brown hair, grey eyes, a pale complexion, scars on her lower lip and under her right eye. She was 4 foot 8 inches tall and weighed 104 pounds. Her general condition on admission was dirty and miserable, and her intemperance was put down to immoral living and bad companions. She was violent when drunk and had spent time in an asylum for depression. She had multiple convictions for drunkenness or other misdemeanours, and she'd been imprisoned 35 times, probably because she couldn't afford to pay the fine. While at Farmfield, her punishments were described as being cell and dietary, and her general conduct was not good. Her case history describes her as a prostitute, a very indolent and scheming woman, most insolent. Ada was discharged from the Farmfield Reformatory, having served her full 2-year term. Ada had 3 daughters who all died in infancy. She had a turbulent life, marked by tragedy and difficulty. This is due in part to her addiction to alcohol, but I believe she was also struggling with mental health problems. But if the institution you're interested in is perhaps one of those that your ancestor was a patient or a resident in, you might want to take a deeper dive into the institution and perhaps do some more of the research yourself. If you'd like to investigate an institution yourself rather than being part of a crowdsourced event, I'd say go for it. I was inspired to do just that when I found my ancestor Clara Stella Denman in the 1901 census as a patient in the Temple Lodge Home for Inebriate Women in Torquay in Devon. Temple Lodge was a home for inebriate women, founded by the Church of England Temperance Society in Torquay in 1891. It was funded entirely by the Church of England Temperance Society and is a wonderful example of Victorian philanthropy. It was run by women for women. It's important to note that while Temple Lodge was located in Torquay, it did not just serve the local area. Patients came from all over the country. Birthplaces include places as far away as Scotland, Ireland, Staffordshire, South Wales, London and Birmingham. Newspapers are a very rich scene for investigating anywhere that you're researching. Stories about the people involved, I think, are the most interesting part. You can see from some of these headlines the language used is very judgmental, though admittedly most of the headlines refer to crimes being committed. One of my motivations for researching Temple Lodge was because I wanted to find out a bit more about what daily life was like there, what the treatments were. So I was especially pleased to find this example of daily life in one of the old journals. To research your institution, you first need to identify your patients or residents. The only surviving records of Temple Lodge are the 2-minute books you can see in the photos on the bottom right of this slide, held at the Lambeth Palace Library in London. They focus mainly on the running of the home and rarely mention patients. No admission registers survive, so I'm constructing my own composite list of patients using census records and newspapers. A third of the patients I've identified were from newspaper reports, which demonstrates their value in not only identifying patients, but in providing extra detail about those patients. I like to keep my data in an Excel spreadsheet for 2 main reasons. It enables me to see where there are gaps in my research, and because it enables me to draw statistics from my research. The headings on my spreadsheet include name, year of birth, birthplace, whether I've checked the British Newspaper Archive, marital status, year and age they were a patient, their own husband's, father's occupations, and whether any of those were alcohol related, the date, cause, place and age at death, whether I found them in the censuses, whether the person was staff or patient, and any outstanding research tasks. The red and blue circle is an example of the type of insights you can gain from a spreadsheet. My sample's small and I haven't finished the project yet, and I'm only researching one inebriate home, so these results aren't generalisable to other inebriate homes, but they are accurate as far as Temple Lodge is concerned. The pie chart on the left shows patients' marital status. You'll also want to find out a bit about the buildings themselves. The 1910 Valuation Act is one of my favourite record sets. The field books tell us that Temple Lodge was owned by Geoffrey Erskine and occupied by the Church of England Temperance Society. It describes the property as being detached, stone-built, slated roof and stucco exterior, built in castellated form with false turrets and battlements. An old property, decorations necessary. It had gas lighting. and the field book also describes the layout of the rooms on each floor. Here you can see a variety of photos from a variety of sources and dates. Top left is a photo from the British Journal of Inebriety in 1913. The coloured photo in the top middle is from the building's time as a YMCA hostel, I think in the 1940s, as is the black and white photo bottom right. Top right is a photo from a newspaper from 1893. The middle photo shows what Temple Lodge looks like today, and bottom left is the only glimpse I've had of the interior of Temple Lodge, the tiny chapel. It's interesting to chart the alterations of the building over time. If you look closely, you can see that an upper floor has been added. I always think it's nice to visit the areas and the places that I'm researching. So my ancestor, who was inspired my project for the Temple Lodge Inebriate home, ran 2 pubs in Bath, and luckily at the time I visited they were still open. So these are the exterior and interior of the 2 pubs she ran. To research an institution, you'll probably want to identify the residents. You might start by compiling a list of patients in one of the censuses, or perhaps you're lucky enough to be able to access the admission registers, which will probably be in a local archive. You can limit your scope by time frame if you wish. By searching newspapers for the name of the institution, you may pick up some more residents and some interesting stories. Minute books may exist which describe the running of the institution. I visited the Church of England archives at Lambeth Palace to view Temple Lodge's minute books. They only cover part of the time that Temple Lodge was operational, but the information is invaluable. If the institution was inspected, find out if those reports still exist and where they are now. For example, the reports of Dr. Branthwaite, the government inspector for inebriate retreats, are at the Parliamentary Archives. I found mention of a 1902 inspection of my ancestor's pub in a book on historic pubs in Bath. The JSTOR website will give you access to many historical journals which may mention your institution, or will at least give you some contemporary context for it. Since COVID, they've allowed people to access up to 100 free read-online articles every month. Search for theses. Someone may have written a thesis on the topic you're interested in, which may even mention your institution. References from theses or articles are great pointers for further reading. The 1910 Valuation Act was an act created for a tax which was never collected, and its records are invaluable for giving descriptions of land and property, map locations, and details of owners and occupiers. If your institution took in people from outside its local area, you may need to consider using records held by local archives. I got a copy of one of Temple Lodge's patients' asylum records from Suffolk Archives. See if there are any books which could provide context or even mention your institution. If you can't find something for your institution specifically, then think laterally. Was it part of an organisation which operated more than one institution? If so, do records exist for that institution, and can you generalise the information to the place that you're researching? From reading an article in the Journal of Inebriety, it was clear to me that the Church of England Temperance Society ran all its homes in the same way. Search for old postcards which may include views of your institution, and use the genealogical skills you already have to research the residents, censuses, birth, marriage and death certificates, and or parish registers of baptisms, marriages and burials to research the residents. I usually go a generation backwards and forwards for each resident. By pulling together information from a variety of sources, I guarantee you'll build up a fascinating portrait of your institution which is rich in social history, and it will give you a depth of understanding of your ancestors' time there which you would never have thought possible. Our next Forgotten Women Friday is on the 8th of November 2024. We're researching various refuges for fallen women, so if you fancy joining in, then get in touch with us via the website and you'll be allocated a woman to research. Several of our Few Forgotten Women team are giving talks at all about that place this year. They're well worth watching, so I've put them up on the screen here if you want to take a screenshot to remind you when they are. I can guarantee they'll be thoroughly researched and absolutely fascinating. And of course, if you can't watch live, then you can always catch up later. The talks are all recorded. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. You can catch me on social media. My handle on all the social media sites is @Willsman1name, or you can tag me in the All About That Place Facebook group, or you're welcome to email me on the address at the bottom of the screen. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of All About That Place.